Hello, everybody, and welcome to R-Rated. I'm Rick, and today we're taking a step away from Ms. Marvel to talk about... That's right, we're talking about Thor, Love and Thunder, Thor 4, featuring Gorr, with Korg, and Natalie Portman. And no more. Oh boy, this is going to be an interesting one. So we've been waiting for kind of a follow-up for Thor after Avengers Endgame for a while now. We knew for a while back that it was going to be another Taika Waititi joint after Thor Ragnarok wound up being kind of a big hit. And the story that I think a lot of folks... Well, so for one, the entirety of Phase 4 is kind of a jumbled mess in a lot of ways, not the least of which dealing with the order in which everything is coming out. All sorts of movies got canceled or delayed or postponed or switched places, some to do with COVID, some to do with other things. This one had nothing to... Well, this one got held back a little bit because of COVID, and you can definitely tell with some of the production quality. But what makes this one a little bit more interesting in terms of how things got switched around is that this was actually supposed to come out after, originally, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which it's unclear whether they would have handled the kind of crossoverness of that differently. I remember first joking after Avengers Endgame came out, I think a lot of people did, that the third Guardians movie would be titled something like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, parentheses, featuring Thor, or something, like making kind of a gag on that sort of thing. And obviously James Gunn got fired and then was rehired, but that lapse in time where he was with Disney resulted in Guardians of the Galaxy getting pushed back by 2 years and then getting pushed back even more because of COVID rescheduling. So now what we're getting is Thor 4 before Guardians 3. Oh my God. And like I was saying before, I'm not really sure how that would have impacted the two stories. We were told, or at least it was suggested early on, that both movies would feature both the Guardians and Thor. It's unclear. It sounds like Guardians 3 is going to take place after Thor Love and Thunder, so it's not like they're just going to set it between them and be good with it. With Guardians 2, that one was set just a few months after the first movie and well before everything else that was actively going on at the same time in the MCU, but they were also really removed from everything else. They were entirely separate until Avengers Infinity War. But now that's not really the case. It's a lot harder to set them kind of in between things that are going on at this point. And we get only really a little glimpse of Thor with the Guardians of the Galaxy at the start of this movie. It's kind of the first, maybe 10 minutes, and then that's the last we see of the Guardians. It is a nice little cameo-ish appearance. It's more than a cameo. It's like an extended scene crossover, I guess you could say. We don't get a ton of them. Groot's voice is getting hilarious as he's, I guess he's supposed to be like a teenager, roughly, at this point. We got Rocket, we got Drax, we got Nebula, Mantis, and obviously Peter Quill. It was nice to see them. They actually... I'm curious if James Gunn was involved at all with the writing of the scenes that involved the Guardians. I'm actually just now realizing... I think he also wrote Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm relatively sure that he was... writer and director for that. Yes, James Gunn and Nicole Perlman. Okay, cool. So I'm curious if James Gunn assisted on the writing for those because they felt pretty in character. And it's interesting because what little we see of them is them being really frustrated with Thor and eventually just super excited to be rid of him. And that's sort of a very on-the-nose kind of interaction because, obviously this movie was fairly polarizing for a lot of folks. I think the biggest difference is, I guess it's not just one, there are some differences between Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder that are important to think about here. So for one, Thor Ragnarok was, from the outset, like it was leaned into during Avengers Age of Ultron, I think. Yeah, Age of Ultron. And it was a very serious event from the get-go. And while Thor was doing kind of silly stuff, it was more, light comedy, action, mashup-y sort of stuff. Whereas the difference here is this one feels a lot more like a kid's movie, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but it's just a tonal shift, especially compared to not even just Ragnarok, but the first two Thor movies, which I'm not a big fan of. Thor The Dark World, I don't think many people are. Thor 1 is fine, it's just very dry. Thor Ragnarok, I think, maybe overcorrected a little too much. I really like that movie, but there were points where I was like, okay, we can, it'd be cool to have a bit more action stuff going on there. But otherwise, I really like Thor Ragnarok. The biggest issue I think I have there is it feels like two separate movies for about 70%. But with Thor Love and Thunder, the comedy is fairly nonstop. And while the overarching goal of the villain is something really significant, he is trying to locate the cosmic entity Eternity. I don't think Eternity is strictly speaking a celestial. I think they're beyond that. They're like another level beyond that. I may be wrong. But he's seeking Eternity so he can kill all the gods. And it's a very serious overarching thing, but it's just kind of like in the background for most of the movie. Whereas with Thor Ragnarok, you see Hela's plan being enacted, and we don't see a ton of her through the movie, but you do cut back to her now and then. She's actively doing stuff. In this movie, Gorr the God Butcher is just kind of hanging out anytime we cut to him, which is a shame because there were apparently scenes that were filmed and ultimately cut that involved him hunting down other gods, including, I think, some we've seen before. I'm trying to recall. I want to say there was a scene with... oh no, I was going to call him Ian Malcolm. Oh, Jeff Goldblum. There we go. That had him being killed by Gorr. There was another one as well, and I'm spacing on it. There was another god that had a scene filmed with them being killed by Gorr, the God Butcher, and it just got cut ultimately. And it would have been cool to see more of that instead of... They opted for turning Gorr into less of an active, destructive villain into more of this like conniving, eerie sort of villain, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we keep coming back to him like being creepy while he's got all of the New Asgard, the children of New Asgard are all like held captive on a weird monochrome planet. And it's interesting. I'm so at odds with it because I do like the idea of him just being, he's legitimately spooky in this movie, to be clear. Anytime he's cloaked in shadow and you see those little brassy golden eyes just peeking out from the shadows, legitimately creepy and a bit scary and very imposing. And they do a really good job with the shots they take of Christian Bale as Gorr the God Butcher, but I feel like he's underutilized in this movie. I think there are ways they could have done better with him. He's such a great actor too, and it feels rare to have an actor with that much gravitas coming into the MCU, and you really want to use them well if you want to like elevate your movies. But there are reports of Taika Waititi kind of goofing off during filming days and just kind of taking it not super seriously. And then famously, after the movie came out, he and, was it Tessa Thompson? Someone else? I forget. Did a video with, I don't know, Vanity Fair or someone, where they made fun of the visual effects errors and VFX kind of cheapness in certain spots in the movie, which, to be fair, yes, the VFX is pretty bad in this movie in a lot of places, but... One, that's not the VFX artist's fault. They were reportedly extremely crunched, and they kept filming new stuff and cutting old stuff at such a rate that it was becoming difficult for them to make any progress on the movie at all. And it's understandable that would be a big issue when you're trying to make stuff look good. and mocking the individual. Like, it's not like they were like, Jason, fuck Jason, look at this, he did this thing, it looks terrible. But like, that's obviously what the VFX artists are gonna feel like, right? Like if they go, oh, Thor's helmet in the battle scene in New Asgard, it looks terrible, it looks plasticky, and it's like hovering in front of his face, which isn't wrong. And with the nuance and the context of, there was a shitload of crunch, so some corners had to be cut, and some of those corners were more obviously cut than others. But if you're just kind of like, whoever worked on that is going to feel like shit. I don't know. It feels like mean and needless. I don't know. I didn't have a ton of comments on the VFX, honestly. Like, generally they were okay. The helmet was weird. On a second rewatch, you could definitely tell some of the scenes were like very green screened. Not like, oh, they've got a halo around them, but like you get the sense there's a certain element when it comes to green screen where like if it's not done carefully, you can definitely tell. Like the lighting difference, it feels strange. Like there's not enough ambient light around. So when Thor is shackled on the stage in Omnipotence City, boy, that's easy to say. Like the lighting on him looks a little bit flat, and even the stuff going on in the background feels a little bit like it's just a flat plane that's been blurred. I don't know. It stands out a little bit as like, ooh, that feels a little bit rough. And just generally some of the effects, everyone looks a little too rubbery at times. I don't think the VFX was like terrible throughout the whole movie, but there were definitely points where it looked rough. Before I jump away from the actors, so Natalie Portman famously is back for this movie as Dr. Jane Foster, a.k.a. the Mighty Thor. So I felt in the first, two phases like Jane Foster was one of the worst characters in the MCU. I blame it more on directing than anything else. She just felt she felt kind of out of place compared with everything else that was going on, and not in like a constructive way. I think there's ways that you could do a nervous fish out of water character that like, sensibly has a bewildered reaction to a bunch of stuff and is like, head over heels, like, just like swept off her feet kind of thing. Like these things can be done, but I don't know why, but it didn't land for me in either of those two movies. And this time around, I think that she is directed better. Natalie Portman is a fantastic actress, so I don't think there was anything wrong with the acting itself per se in any of the three appearances, but I think she was directed better this time around. I think she was generally written better as well, with the exception of like there's and I guess now this is just a canon quality of her and it's not a directorial thing, but there are certain points where she kind of just has this, I don't want to call it like a really immature vibe, but she kind of just there's a way to put it, not like flip exactly, but very over casual in serious circumstances. And maybe that's an issue with some like points in the MCU in general, but I don't know. There's certain points where it's like, oh, we got the serious thing to do, and it's like, oh, we got some jokey things. The speaker grenade was definitely like, okay, we don't have to hang on this for this long, you guys. This is okay. All right, let's get on with it. Let's get on with it. It felt very odd having the movie focus so hard on Thor and Jane's relationship in general. Like, there needs to be some focus on it because it's the first time they're seeing each other in almost a decade, but also like we're flashing back essentially to a time between Thor 2 and Infinity War, essentially. And the door just creaked and moved on its own. We're taken back to a point between Thor 2 and Infinity War. We kind of see their relationship, and it's done up in a way where it would make sense if it was set after Ragnarok somehow, just the way that Thor acts and his personality and all those things. The problem is, I guess maybe it's more after Age of Ultron than Thor 2, but the problem is, during that era, before Infinity War and before Ragnarok, Thor is a very serious character, generally, like over-stoic at times, to the point where he, like, to his detriment, to be fair, but he came off as kind of humorless and dry. And, like, I didn't like that thing. I didn't like that about him generally as a character, but that was the character that he was during that period of time. So, like, having shots of him in a hot dog costume dancing around and stuff is like, there was a better way to gradually kind of be like, yeah, and he warmed up to being silly and goofy over that time, because there was a chunk of time there, and I don't know, it felt a little out of place when considering it alongside what else was going on for him at the time. So it felt a little out of character there. Maybe I'm like hammering down a little bit too much on specific moments, and I guess in a related sense, the weird love triangle situation going on here that goes like 6 directions at once. There's literally a love triangle between Thor, Mjolnir, and Stormbreaker, and it's very, very weird. It seems to explicitly grant some level of sentience to both Mjolnir and Stormbreaker, as opposed to everything before suggesting that they were enchanted weapons, essentially. Like, to the point where Stormbreaker is visibly characterizable as jealous. Like, does stuff out of jealousy. Such a weird, strange thing to do. Like, I laughed mostly because it was so unexpected, but on a second watch, I'm like, this is some strange shit. Yeah. And like, Thor, like, pours a beer on it to give it its first drink, and like chats with it like they're in a relationship, and like tickles its ball. I'm pretty sure that's the name for the back part of a hammer or axe. When it's not a claw. Because I guess the front part of a hammer is the peen. He didn't tickle the peen. Oh, God damn it. It's weird. I don't know. There's so many elements of this movie that are done up in such a strange way that I don't really know how I feel about it. And just kind of shake up a bunch of canon. Not like the canon is the thing that matters the most, but when you get the idea that, like, oh, Stormbreaker is an enchanted axe that he crafted, and it uses a part of Groot as its handle, and we watched it get forged, and it can channel electricity and can be summoned by Thor. Okay, cool. Oh, but now it's also jealous of Thor using Mjolnir, which is the thing that he did in Endgame also. It's very weird. Also, we also entirely reframe what gods are in the MCU. Up until this point, gods were, well, I take that back. It's gotten a little bit messy lately, but up until the end of Phase 3, the gods, as far as we could tell, were just extraterrestrial beings, or just otherwise supernatural or super powerful beings that exist and show up, and people worship them as gods. The Asgardians are a race of human-like aliens. The gods of Egypt, that's a little bit of a question mark still. I'm still not 100% clear on how all that works, but they obviously have some rather extreme powers. They're much more godlike than the Asgardians are. Like, Asgardians are very much, I mean, like Greco-Roman Norse-style gods, as compared to gods of Egypt, which were more elemental in nature, I guess you could say. Like, they control aspects of the universe kind of deal. Khonshu literally, like, moves the stars and the moon at one point. You also get, there was mention of the goddess Bast in the beginning of Black Panther. We don't really know much about Bast. Apparently Bastet appeared in the background essentially in Omnipotence City, and was just kind of there for that. I know I'm forgetting one, and I just thought of it, and then I forgot about it. Nope. I'll move on. But the interesting one is there's visibly, so I don't know much about Aztec or Mayan mythologies, but there's visibly a South American god, like a Central or South American god or Mexican, like Aztec Mayan god, that is sitting directly in front of Thor and his party when they go to Omnipotence City. And it's a very interesting move, considering that's the movie that's coming out immediately before Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which features Namor with a lot of Aztec imagery going along with him. I thought that was kind of an interesting kind of thing there. I'm desperately just trying to think of what, there was one other god example that turned up that I was like, but the point being, this movie seems to, like, it's weird. It kind of goes along with the idea that it goes along with the idea in a sense that these gods are not like all powerful beings, but it also adheres much more firmly to the pantheonic, like, god of blank, god of thunder, god of lightning, god of bow. Bow, god of dumplings. My bad. Which is interesting. I feel like a lot of people would fight more about being god of a certain thing. It also is a very Queen Mab style power structure where it seems like they need people to believe in them, and like to I guess they don't need to believe in them, but like it seems like there's the sacrifices made to them, for example, give them some form of power or strength or something. It's interesting. Oh, I remember the other thing. Eternals. Eternals also dealt with the idea of gods as, you know, otherworldly beings that are being worshipped as gods, because I think two of them, Athena and I forget which. There was another one. There's way too many. There's 10 of them, so it's hard to remember stuff, but two of them are revered as gods over the course of human history. It's also going to be very interesting. So now we have Athena being the inspiration for Athena in ancient human history, but we also have Zeus as an actual god. So, and yeah, was Athena in the shot of him in Omnipotence City? Does she actually exist? Are they kind of like going, because Hercules is the son of Zeus and Athena, right? So who's Hercules' mom? It would be kind of incredible if they just rolled with it super hard and were like, yeah, Athena hung out with the Greek gods for a while. She just said fuck it and went along with it or something. They're not going to, but it would be interesting if they did. So there's some messy stuff there. There's also there was also cut scenes of Thor and Zeus having a way more amicable conversation about things. And it's a lot more of guidance. And it was really nice, especially in the sense that, like, Thor misses his dad, Odin. So being able to have, like, a bit of a connection with Zeus, especially with him being someone elementally tied with, you know, lightning. I don't know. I think that would have been kind of a nice thing to have. I get why they did what they did, though. Keeps it more of an action movie, even though honestly there's much more of a focus on connections and relationships and things. So it would have been nice thematically to give them that instead. But we do wind up with a battle in Omnipotence City, where very unexpectedly Zeus strikes down Korg with Thunderbolt, and he collapses into a pile of rocks in a way that makes it look like he's just dead. Like, it looks similar to the way Thanos took out Drax and Mantis in Infinity War, except this was not an illusion or reality bending or whatever. Although Thor then catches Thunderbolt and throws it directly through Zeus's chest, very abruptly, and he falls hundreds of feet from his platform. That was legitimately stunning. And the fact that like the audience in Omnipotent City wasn't freaking out at that was an odd choice. But basically, Omnipotent City forward, the back half of the movie is, in my opinion, substantially better than the first. A lot more artsy at points, a lot more dramatic. We get a lot more Gorr as the character Gorr as a like multidimensional kind of dude. They wind up stealing Thunderbolt, which is Zeus's weapon. Notably, too, they do a good job. So Thor, generally speaking, his electricity has kind of a white-hot, bluish sort of tint to it. But Thunderbolt, Zeus's Thunderbolt, has more of a yellow tinge to it. And anytime he is using Thunderbolt for the rest of the movie, instead of his own, so he has his own lightning. Some blue lightning goes into it when he throws Thunderbolt. But for the rest of the movie, they're very consistent about anytime he's using his own inborn powers, the lightning is kind of whitish and blue. And anytime he uses Thunderbolt, the resulting electricity is yellow. And I thought that was a clever little thing to kind of be able to distinguish between those, instead of just going like, oh yeah, Thunderbolt is like white now and uses blue electricity and yada yada. Including eventually when he gives the kids the temporary power of Thor. I thought that was a cute scene. A lot of people didn't like it. I thought that was fun. I like the fact that Thor, having learned that he can imbue his power into stuff in general, he didn't realize that he was accidentally enchanting Mjolnir during his relationship with Jane. That's how she winds up being granted the power of Thor anyway. But now knowing that, he gives that to the kids, and I think that's a cool, clever. I do appreciate that every one of his movies has him learning to become a little bit more like Odin, and learn not just the responsibilities, but also the abilities and how to use them well and intelligently. And I think that him giving the kids the power to fight back was really cool. They all have yellow electricity because he uses Thunderbolt to give them the power. And the little crackling thing looks like a tree, perhaps like a world tree, like Yggdrasil. I thought that was cool. A lot of people were making fun. Speaking of the kids, a lot of people made fun of the floating head like CGI they use for Axel when he's communicating with Thor. It's fine. I think, honestly, everyone went with like the cheapest possible picture they could. And there are far worse looking things in this movie and far more justifiably bad presentation things in this movie compared to that. It's fine. I don't know. Especially, he doesn't know how to use his powers yet, so he's just kind of like trying to connect, and there's his face. Like, it makes sense in universe, and it doesn't look that bad. I don't know. I thought that was okay. We wind up Gorr's planet. Shortly after Omnipotent City, we go to Gorr's planet, and this is probably the most interesting sequence in the movie. I think it's the best sequence, the most interesting. There's a cute little sight gag as they're approaching the planet and just kind of thud into it because you think it's a full planet, but it's actually like essentially like a very small moon. And it's much closer than it looks. So their boat just kind of poof, like goes right into it. I thought that was a cute joke. When they're on the planet, all color is sapped from existence out of it. Like, it's an interesting, I forget if they actually like try to explain why they recognize that they have lost their color. So it's an in-universe diegetic thing. And I think that's kind of a neat thing there. And the fact that Mjolnir and Stormbreaker can just faintly glow color onto things is kind of interesting. Really great dialogue scene once Gorr has them captured and kind of held by, he has control of these like monsters over the course of this movie, and they all have this like ferromagnetic fluid sort of vibe to them. So if you don't know what that is, a ferromagnetic fluid is basically, to my knowledge of it, it's a liquid that has a large amount of iron material in it. So that's what the ferro and ferromagnetic means. It means ferrous means iron. And essentially what happens is if you have enough of a concentration of iron in there, then using a magnet, you can actually create magnetic fields that... So the way magnetism works, oh my God, is you pass a magnetic field over something, and essentially the polarity of the material aligns itself. So normally if you have, a metal, all of the materials in that metal are generally just kind of facing whatever direction. If you imagine a bunch of like north and south little bars, little compass point style things, they're all just kind of pointing in different directions, going wherever. It doesn't really matter. And that's the reason why most metal doesn't have a magnetic field to it, is because it doesn't have any real cohesion to it or anything. But once you put a magnet to it, everything lines up and it all locks into place and extends that magnetic field. And that's the reason why, if you take a magnet, put a paper clip, you can put another paper clip and another paper clip. If it's a strong enough magnet, you can chain a bunch of them together, because something that is connected to a magnet in that magnetic field is itself a small magnet. It's like weeping angels. So what winds up happening with ferromagnetic fluids is it passes through this liquid, and then the way that the liquid molecules work, they align, but they also are shifting their shape, because that's ultimately what magnetized things want to do. They want to essentially line up to be, in line, and as much, expand the magnetic force as much as it can, uses it most efficiently. So what you wind up with is it has like a spiky ball sort of look generally. It looks like a wobbly, spiky ball made of like a wet jelly. There's a lot of great videos out there on ferromagnetic fluids. Totally recommend checking that out. But it's an interesting idea for like an inspiration for monsters, because it means that they all have this kind of unsettling quality to them, where they look shadowy and weird. They're solid, but they seem to just blend into their backgrounds and blur into their own shadows, and they kind of look a little wobbly and wet and a little bit like, it's a really cool look. I think it's great. Thor gets tricked very, very easily into using Stormbreaker, which is something Gorr needs in order to unlock the gate to eternity in the first place. Very stupid move. But it was a good fight. Essentially, this little moon is like a little Super Mario Galaxy planet, where the gravity is so low that even as so at one point Gorr drags the Necro Sword across the ground, and little flecks of stone and dirt and things kind of come up, and they kind of float up in slow motion in a way where by the end you have this total mess of a planet that they're fighting on, because anything that gets disrupted takes like a minute or two to fall back to the ground. It was a really stunning visual, very clearly extended and inspired by the story of the Valkyries from Thor Ragnarok. That one was done with, to my knowledge, it was done with an extreme high-speed camera and a lighting rig that would move the lights very, very fast. I think it was actually in some cases like a circle, so it would spin around this whole scene. Like, they have a huge circle of lights, and it would I think programmatically go from one to the other, or maybe it physically spinned. I don't recall, but they had a camera that was capturing hundreds or thousands of frames per second. So we had these extreme slow motion shots where the lighting would like do that. This one does similar. During the fight scene, I don't know if the idea is that the moon is rotating so fast that whatever local star is just there and like from their perspective is just like whipping around a bunch or what, but this is a cool look. I really liked it. So this story focuses about half on essentially the plotline for the Mighty Thor run of Marvel Comics fairly recently. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I want to say it was within the last 10 years. Maybe within the last 5. Maybe not the last 5. It was probably like 2013, 2014, something like that. So a little bit further back. But the idea being Jane is, has stage 4 cancer. I don't think they say what kind of cancer it is, but she is like going through chemo, but it's not going so well. But when she becomes the Mighty Thor, all of those things go away, and she's able to like stand on her own 2 feet and like be strong and powerful. But every time she uses those powers, it actually drains that away from her. They gave an explanation in the movie, and I don't quite remember what it was for why she's getting sicker. I think it's just that she's exerting her body so much that it's just like wicking that away from her. And it was an interesting way of doing that. There's only so much time that they could use in the movie to make that happen. But it does feel a little bit rough when the very first shot we have of Jane is her in a giant MRI machine. And you get the feeling pretty much instantly in the movie that she is showing up to die. And we get kind of a parallel scene earlier in the movie, basically right after Thor leaves the Guardians to go find Lady Sif, who's in a battle to try to protect a god from Gorr the God Butcher. And she has her arm cut off, but she's alive. And she's talking about how she wants to die on the battlefield in battle. And Thor's like, but the battle's over. And she's like, okay, yeah, let's get out of here then. Because you can only go to Valhalla if you die in glorious battle, right? So the problem with that is, big spoiler coming up in 3, 2, 1. At the end of this movie, Jane decides to use Mjolnir one more time to go and help Thor stop Gorr. And she dies. She dies after battle. She dies maybe 5-10 minutes after battle because there's a really elongated dialogue kind of thing that goes on, which is fair. It's kind of the after final battle tension of like, okay, now what? But she dies several minutes later and does go to Valhalla. You get a stinger where she goes and she gets to meet Heimdall as well. And it makes me wonder, like, oh, could they convince I'm just gonna go ahead and look this up before I say something dumb. Yep, he's still alive. Good. Could they bring back Sir Anthony Hopkins, for one last little thing with Odin? This movie, the stinger of the movie showing Jane and Heimdall not alive, they are dead, but they're in Valhalla, makes me wonder if they are going to return in Secret Wars or in the Kang Dynasty. Either of them, Kang Dynasty or Secret Wars, could have not just, the walls of the multiverse completely collapsing, but also, who's to say that the realm of the afterlife or realms of the afterlife also don't, like, those barriers don't also come down and allow some people to come back. Be curious to see. I think there's a possibility of that. Who knows? Literally, they could do anything with Secret Wars. They could literally do anything. We'll have to see. I'm honestly curious if they will bring in the canonical, like, universe-consuming Doctor Strange. We saw a similar one in Multiverse of Madness, but I'm talking about the one from What If, essentially the guardian of the multiverse, Strange Supreme. I think he was called. It'd be interesting to see that one played out. But yeah, the final fight scene was kind of fun. With the kids kind of doing their thing, and then you definitely feel some of the tension of, like, them trying to figure out, like, how they're going to stop Gorr, stop the Necro Sword. I love the fact that when Jane uses Mjolnir, she's able to kind of crumble it into its pieces and then reconstitute it, and she can control them individually and stuff. It's like, that's a really cool power. I thought that was awesome. And she eventually is able to shatter the Necro Sword and then uses the pieces to kind of, like, trap the piece of the Necro Sword before it can reform, because it can also reform, and then uses her lightning to destroy it, permanently destroying the Necro Sword, but at the cost of her own life. It was an interesting little thing there. I thought that was kind of cool. The ending, we see, we have Jane passing into Valhalla, and Gorr is also winds up succumbing to his wounds, but not before using eternity to wish his daughter back to life, who was only really known in this movie as Thor. As Love. Gorr, Thor, Love. I've seen some credit her as Love, Gorr's daughter or something, which is like, I don't know, man. Until we see it or hear it, it's whatever. She's played by Thor's actual daughter, which is very cute. Thor's wife shows up in this movie again in a very brief cameo as the wolf woman that he makes out with. She previously showed up in the MCU as Dr. Jane Foster in the stinger to Thor 2. Natalie Portman was not available when they needed to shoot that, so they put, I don't even know if they put his wife in a wig or if she just had similar hair at the time anyway, but that's her. That's the reason you don't really see her face during that stinger. I think I've kind of covered just about everything here. Oh, I didn't even mention in the opening sequence with Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy, I love the little Muppety creatures that they fight. It looked like something out of Labyrinth. I thought that was really cool. I haven't seen Dark Crystal, but maybe it's like that too. I've heard Dark Crystal is a very creepy looking movie, so I don't know. But it was awesome. Little owl Muppet guys that he was fighting. That was great. The jokes go on way too long in this movie, and I say this as a person who has a high tolerance for drawn out jokes. It comes up a lot from the very first scene. They just have jokes that keep going and going. I think somewhere between Ragnarok and Love and Thunder is the movie that Taika Waititi is best suited for making. I think this one was a much weaker showing ultimately than Ragnarok. I've had to digest it for a while, but I think that this one has some pitfalls that it didn't really recover from very well. I realize I also didn't talk about the stinger here. We get Hercules, and he's the guy from Ted Lasso, apparently, which is fun. And they make a great little bit of commentary. Maybe the smartest line in this entire movie is Zeus, who is alive. He survived his wounds. Bemoaning the fact that people now worship superheroes instead of gods, which is like, congratulations, yes. That's like maybe the best possible thesis you could ever make in a movie that features, gods and superheroes as a thing. Because yes, the whole, like, a big piece of the superhero mythos in general is that it's a slightly more self-aware form of the older worship of gods and things, and it is an apt point to make. And then he sicks his son Hercules on seeking down Thor and taking him out. So I don't know. It would be Thor War and Thunder or something. I don't know. Thunderbolt and Lightning. Oh no, that's totally going to be what the next, not the subtitle, but Taika Waititi's been big on doing the big, like, rock tracks as the major themes. So that means we're definitely going to get oh my God, Bohemian Rhapsody. Yeah, Thor 5, if we get it, I assume we will, is totally, I'm going to call it now, it's going to have Bohemian Rhapsody in it. It's tough on this movie. I generally liked it, but it's got a lot of issues. I don't think I could give it a negative score ultimately, because I did enjoy it overall. I would watch it again, but I can't really justify giving it much of a positive score either. So I think we're going to cut the difference and just give it a 5 right down the middle. There have been worse movies in this phase even. But yeah, this one was a bit of a bummer. Still had a good time with it, but yeah, I think more of a miss than a hit, but not by much. And I'm hoping that they can rein in Taika Waititi a little bit for the next one. This one he wrote mostly by himself, I believe, or at least he was in charge of the screenplay, whereas last time he was not. So here's hoping that they have someone jump in with him next time. And speaking of next time, when I come back next time, I'm going to be talking the Ms. Marvel. I keep saying Ms. Marvel. I've seen the finale, Miss Marvel finale. It looks like Ms., right? Has everyone else said Ms.? I think they said Miss Marvel, not Ms. Marvel. I don't know. Anyway, when we come back next time, I'm going to talk up the finale of that before moving on to the later projects of Phase 4. I would love to hear what you think about Thor Love and Thunder as well as this video. I'm looking for ways to kind of improve my craft if I can. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm going to get out of here. Have a good one. Bye.